Do you feel like you're able to express your truth? Or are there parts of your truth that you're unable to share with others? Of our two creative energy centers of the body, the throat chakra, is deeply impacted when we're not able to say what we need to say, or when we're forced to speak untruths in order to protect ourselves or to protect others. Now, at the same time, the throat chakra is a master manifestation center of the body. So if we're having trouble drawing in the things that we desire, it's worth exploring any blockages that may exist in the throat chakra. So welcome, I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, Merry Meet. I'm here tonight talking all about the throat chakra. So if you're joining me live, welcome. You can leave questions and comments in the chat. There's a Q&A at the end. I'll answer any questions about the throat chakra or anything else related to witchcraft, shadow work, and energy work. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in and just begin exploring a little bit about the throat chakra, and then we'll talk about ways to tell whether your own throat chakra is balanced, if it's too open or it's too closed. And then at the end, we'll talk about some practices and exercises that you can use to balance your throat chakra. All right, so the throat chakra is called Vishuddha, sometimes Vishuddhi in Sanskrit. It translates, depending on the translation we're using, it translates to purification or exceptionally pure. This speaks a lot about how we actually open the throat chakra. We're going to talk about that in a bit, and how the purification of the body and the mind can help us clear any blockages in the throat chakra. So just saying hi, Misty. I see her in the chat. Hi, everybody. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is the second of our manifestation centers of the body, but this is the first of the spiritual chakras of the body. So the way this works is we have 7 major chakras that are inside the body. There's a little bit of debate there. Is the crown really inside or is it outside of the physical body? But at least these are the 7 that we normally talk about. And we have what we call the lower triad. So that is our root, our sacral chakra, and our solar plexus. This is all about the physical, right? And then we have the heart. The heart is often said to be the bridge between the spiritual and the physical below it. And then we have the upper 3, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. So what the heart effectively does is it kind of separates the upper triad from the lower triad. But all of this needs to be operational if we really hope to reach our highest spiritual potential. So this is why looking at all chakras and not just the ones that we think are blocked or we have issues with is important for our energy journey and our shadow work journey as well. So to successfully reach these upper chakras, of course, we have to have done some work in the lower chakras as well. And it requires a certain level of purification. So this is a good time to talk about what does that mean. So what that means is that we need to have health in the body the best that we can. And sometimes all that really means is that we are working to achieve health in the lower energy centers. So if we have begun to kind of balance the root and work with the sacral, and we're moving up to the solar plexus, and then we've done some work with the heart, that means that we've begun to purify the lower energy centers. That opens up the space to begin working with the throat. But if we haven't done any of that work and we just kind of jump directly to the throat, what we may find is that while we're able to open up the throat, we have purification issues, or we have energy blockages below it, which is even if we're opening it up and we're working with it, we're not working with it to the highest degree that we could. So that's what it means when we talk about needing that level of purification in the body. And so I will also point out that because the lower energy centers are so tied to the physical, what that means is that purification in the lower energy centers has to do with our physical health, our emotional health. That a lot has to do with the heart and the sacral chakra, and then that leads to our spiritual health of the upper chakras. So doing things like making sure we're eating properly, making sure that we're sleeping enough, making sure that we're moving our body enough. These are all the things that help release the blockages of the lower chakras, among other things. But we just want to make sure there's some kind of a health in the lower part of the body. Now, the energy of the throat chakra is very much also connected to the third eye, which we'll be talking about in a few weeks. and then on to the crown. And this is where we really step into our spiritual gifts. Now, one thing that is very purifying for the body and very purifying for the throat chakra is sound. So doing sound healing is exceptionally good for this chakra as well as many others. And I'm going to teach you, for those who don't know about seed sounds and a little bit about mantras. We'll talk about that at the end when we go through the energy balancing practices of the throat. But just know, anytime that you're using your physical voice, you are activating your throat chakra. So singing, chanting, anything like that is like, it's really good. So if you feel like you've got some throat chakra issues, turn on some music and sing to it. That it can be one of the best things that you could possibly do for the throat. Now, sound is an energy that purifies the body in many different ways. If you've ever been to a sound bath, you've probably experienced that. And if you haven't been to one, I highly recommend trying to get to one if you can find one. Even if it's online, they're good online. In person, they're even better because you're in the room where the bowls are making the sound, and that is changing the vibrations of your body. So just welcome, saying hi to those who are joining. I seem to be having trouble with the comments again. Now I can see them. I refreshed them. Okay, I see Cindy's here as well in the comments. The throat is visualized to be blue. Now this is different than the indigo blue of the third eye. This is more like a cerulean blue. To me, the stone lapis lazuli is the quintessential stone for the throat chakra, at least in my opinion. I'm going to give you some other stones at the end that you can work with as well. But if you look at that color of lapis, that is the throat chakra color. Now, it is also visualized as a 16 petal lotus. So every single chakra has a symbol. And so some people choose to work with the chakras through meditating on the symbol that represents that chakra. So there's many different ways. You're going to see there's many different ways that you can work with it, and that's one of them. Now, it's connected to the element of Akasha. That is the name in Sanskrit. It essentially translates to ether. And for many years, until I don't actually know the date, but sometime in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the name of this chakra, or the name of this element in English was changed to space. Some people call it space. If you're a witch, you would probably call this spirit, the element of spirit, that fifth element that kind of governs the four below it. And this Akasha, or spirit element, is different than all the other elements. So it doesn't have a physical representation on Earth like the others do. So we can look at water and we can imagine the water element in that. We can look at salt or dirt or something like that, and we can imagine the earth element in it. But as far as Akasha or spirit, there's not really anything for us to visualize, right? What it really is it's just the energy that's inside, that's all around us, that permeates everything and basically gives birth to the other elements below it. Now, in order to work with it, typically people will work with the four elements below it, and then that immediately leads to spirit. Now, in a magical circle, the element of spirit is very much connected to you. So if you're somebody who does a lot of ritual and you bring in the elements into your ritual, and you bring in candles for fire, and you bring in maybe some salt for earth and some water for water, and then maybe some incense, or perhaps you have like a sage stick for the element of air, you yourself represent spirit. Typically it's found right at the center of the circle, and many will say, in my tradition we say it's above and it's also below. It's not just in the center, it's all of that around it. So you yourself represent that. Now, something that's interesting about the throat chakra, and I talked about this probably like a year ago when I did a different video on the throat chakra, and so it's always worth mentioning again. This is something that's called entrainment. And entrainment is so important for us when we're trying to understand how the chakras operate in our body. This isn't just for the throat chakra, it's for all of them, but it really makes sense here because we're talking about sound a lot of times when we're talking about the throat. So what happens is that when we have two wavelengths that are similar in frequency, so really all this means is they're kind of similar in energy, eventually they will begin to do what we call entrain. And that means they start to vibrate at the same frequency. So perhaps one of them was a little lower than the other and one was a little higher than the other. And if they're with each other long enough, they'll eventually start to entrain or vibrate at the same pace. Now, what's interesting about this is that, it's a neat theoretical idea. I think it's really fascinating to even think about it, right? That this happens, that waves start to move like each other. But when we apply this to the human body, this is where it starts to get really interesting. So this is why when you go to places like, let's say you go to a sacred place. For example, I got back from Sedona a few weeks ago, and and if you've never been to Sedona, Sedona is known for its vortexes. These are energy centers, and so many people will tell you is that if you go to Sedona and you all you have to do is you have to walk near a vortex, and immediately the energy in your own body will begin to try to be like the energy of that vortex. So that vortex will do something to your energy. And it's through this process of entrainment, because as you come near it, you begin to vibrate at that same frequency. So this is also why you could go to like a special place that you love in your yard, near like near the ocean, near a creek that you know, and you close your eyes and you start to feel like you're vibrating with that energy. That's why, because you're beginning to entrain with that. And so there's some that say what we're really doing when we're trying to meditate in nature is we're trying to entrain with the energy that the earth is emitting constantly. And that what's interesting about that energy is that it's not a whole lot different than the pulse of energy that we transmit as well. So if we get into a deep enough state of meditation, and for some all that really means is closing the eyes and sitting there for a minute or so and just really getting into kind of an alpha state, you begin to vibrate with the energy of the earth. So when we say we're connecting to the earth or we're grounding or we're doing all those things, that's what we're doing. And so this is sort of like a scientific way of explaining what we as witches know, that we can simply just connect to others' energy around us, and we can also connect to the energy of the earth. Now, at the same time, dissimilar energies create dissonance. So if you've ever been around a person who you didn't vibe with, or you've ever been to a place that you didn't feel good in, it's because your energy is too different than that place. And so that actually leads us to another thought here as well, which is as we begin to elevate spiritually, we change our vibration, we change the type of energy that we emit. And that can help explain why certain people or things in our life that once fit no longer fit, because our energy is just different than those things were. And that maybe perhaps those things or those people, maybe they haven't changed at all, but we have. And so I know that this is something that is talked about a lot in groups where we are evolving spiritually, right? People fall away around us, or we no longer gel with them anymore. And again, here's a scientific way to explain that. Okay, so that's a little side note from the exploration of the throat chakra, but I wanted to bring that out. And hi, saying hi to Joelle and Anthony. It's like I keep having to refresh the comments and then I can see everybody here. Hi, everybody. Okay, so like I said, so this entrainment is the basic idea behind chanting. It's the idea behind seed sounds, which we're going to talk about at the end when we go through the practices for the throat chakra. It's the idea behind mantras. So essentially what all those things are doing is they're changing your energetic vibration, and then you begin to vibrate with the vibration of that sound. So, for example, the seed sound of the throat chakra, and I'll go through all of them at the end, but the seed sound of the throat chakra is hum. So if you intone the sound hum, you will begin to vibrate closer to that sound, and then you will be able to change the energetic vibration of your body. Your body will begin to vibrate with it as well. So we'll get more into that later, but let's talk for a moment too about how the chakra system connects to our shadow work as well. So the throat in particular, of all the chakras, many of us will say that, who study chakras will say that the throat is the gateway between the unconscious and the conscious. And so therefore we see how it plays such a large role in our shadow work. So when blockages occur here, what we find is there's trouble getting things from the unconscious to the conscious, which is the whole point of shadow work anyway, right? We're trying to get what's underneath the surface out into the consciousness. And if we can't get it through the throat chakra, we can't get it up into the higher chakras either. So this is why self-expression is so important, because it connects the outer worlds to the inner worlds. And it's basically how we convey to the world who we are is through our voice. That's oftentimes the first way that we tell people what we need and what we want. So just think about a baby. What is the first thing that they do if they need to tell you what they need? Is they scream, right? They cry, because that's the way to tell the outside world that we need something. Now, as we become older, well, given various things that happen to us or the people around us who may or may not be supportive of our voice, we start to learn whether it's safe or not safe to speak. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that, because that has a big impact on the throat chakra. But at least know that this is kind of the first gateway to get our needs out, is through the voice. Now, the thing that's interesting about the world we live in, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, we all chose to incarnate here right now at this time for a very specific reason. And every single one of us, there's a different reason for it. And that's something that we can learn through working with our shadow work and working through our soul contracts and everything. But we're all here for a specific reason at this time. But this world is a world that has a collective unconscious that's very blocked in many of its chakras. So our world, I think, has a blocked throat chakra. We live in a world that doesn't let us express everything we need to express. Okay, so let that kind of sink in, and think about too, what are you able to express? And are there any parts of yourself that you feel that you can't? Now, you may find why we come to groups like this is because this is an open forum where people can express the truths that perhaps they can't say other places. But think about your normal muggle world that you live in with your normal muggle people around you. Are there places where you can't express your truth? Because this world has created a place where many of us can't. So if we just simply look at the idea of being a witch, and we could look at many, many, many different hats and personality traits and various things that we embody. But at least if we're just looking at the idea of being a witch, we can already see where the world has made it hard for us to express that. Now, some of us express it very freely, and that's great. I wish, it's oftentimes the grass looks greener on the other side. I've often wished that I was someone who was born into a family where I could express all that I am, but I was not. So I was born into a family where I had to stay in the broom closet, where when I had gifts as I was a younger child that were not like intellectual gifts, but more like spiritual gifts, I was taught very quickly that those were not something to talk about. They were not something that we were going to talk about in this family. And then when my mother found a book of mine on witchcraft when I was like 16 or 17, she freaked out, and that taught me very quickly, this is not something that we can talk about. My family's very Catholic. My brother is a fundamentalist. So got to be in the broom closet partially. So this has always been painful. And I'm sure anybody here who has like a part of themselves that they can't express, whether it's about being a witch or about being something else, another part of you, and you can't express it, it's very, very painful, right? Especially when I think about like 20 years, 25 years being on this path, being the high priestess of a coven for 10 years, running body, mind, witchcraft. It's crazy to me that a person like that has to be partially in the broom closet, but c'est la vie, this is the world that we live in. So where I'm going with this is that there is this collective fear outside in the world that doesn't allow us all to express what we need to express, and that's immediately going to impact the throat chakra, okay? So if you have anything about you that you can't express to someone, it's impacting your throat, okay? So just something to think about. Now, psychologically, the throat chakra develops around 7 to 12 years old. The heart chakra usually kind of comes online and develops before it. The heart chakra allows us to become less selfish and allows us to relate to people. The throat chakra is what gives us the ability to speak our truth. So going back to what I was saying, if you grew up in a household where there were certain things about you that you couldn't express, that's immediately going to impact the throat as it's developing when you're a child, between those formative years of 7 and 12. Now, the other thing that can happen is trauma, abuse, lies, right? If there's like a lot of lies in the household, that's gonna impact your throat. Messages that were mixed messages you received, like one parent says one thing and the other says the other thing, or the same parent says two different things in two different situations, it just becomes very confusing. Mixed messages like that, secrets that the family was keeping, excessive criticism from anybody who was bringing you up. All these traumas and abuses will lead to an impacted throat chakra. And so what it means is that, like, probably a lot of us have an issue in this area, would be my guess. Also, if you're living in constant fear of being found out about something, that will also impact the throat. If you're being blocked from expressing your truths or bottling up emotions, that's also a big one. So in my family, everybody is very stoic when it comes to emotions, but I wasn't. It's just like sometimes I've thought about, was I switched at birth. Like, I really had many fantasies about this, because I was like, I'm so different than these people. It's so weird, right? I could feel emotions so strongly and nobody else seemed to be able to. And so I would, watch a movie and I would become very emotional, right? Even if it, and I look around the room and like nobody there is like even affected by this. And so what I learned is that I have to bottle the emotion. And so what I do is I try to keep myself from crying. So sometimes what I would do is I would hide in the bathroom and or in my closet or something. But if I had to be sitting with people watching the movie, I would just try to stifle it down. And what I learned later, I'm going to tell you a story at the very end about how I discovered that my throat chakra was blocked really badly, is when I was a kid, I noticed that like there would be pain in my throat, and that's basically the stifling of the emotion. It's like the expression is rising up and then we clamp it down right here because we can't let it out. So if you've ever had a similar experience where you had to bottle up emotions, again, you're going to have something impacted in the throat. Because we fear what would happen if we opened up. I don't know, what is the big fear? I don't know what my big fear was. I guess maybe being rejected because I was so different and so weird or something like that, or feeling guilt or shame at being different. When we're kids, we don't have anybody to explain all this to us. And a lot of us grew up in households where, I don't know, they didn't have magical or spiritual abilities, or they maybe they did and they didn't express them. Later on I learned that I actually have some uncles who I think have some abilities, but because they couldn't express them, they turned to alcohol. So it's like, we got to get it out some way, right? So how are we going to get it out? So if we're not listened to as a child, that's another thing. Like, let's say you were trying to speak and nobody listened to you. That would be another thing that could impact it. Basically, all of this teaches you to shut down your throat. Now, lies are really the demon of the throat chakra. This is what Anna Dia Judith, she uses the terminology demons. So she says every chakra has a demon, and everyone has I can't remember the word she uses. It's not savior, but it's like something along those lines. I prefer to use the words like challenge and gift. So the gift of the throat chakra is expression, self-expression. And the challenge of the throat chakra is lies, okay? So lies and untruths are very important for us to think about, and they're not the same thing necessarily. Sometimes like lies takes on that very negative connotation, but sometimes we have to tell untruths to protect us or to protect other people. So for example, this business that I run, my family thinks this is a yoga business. There is a small portion of yoga that I teach in our membership. This isn't really a yoga business, right? So that is an untruth that I need to tell to save me, protect me, and probably to protect them from finding out the truth and whatever that would do to them if they found it out. But what we really have to understand is that anytime we tell untruths, it impacts the throat chakra in some way. Okay, so sometimes the untruths are necessary. There's nothing we can do about it. What that means, though, is if we have to tell untruths, then we need to do more work with the throat chakra. That's all that means. And then also I would just consider do our untruths do us more harm or more good? And that's like it's only something that you can answer based on that specific untruth. Sometimes they do more good, in which case we'll work with the throat chakra. Sometimes they do more harm, in which case then we have to learn how to speak our truth and how to get that out. And that's going to be a different answer for everybody. Okay. So let's move on here. I see that Pamela was saying it's a bad connection. I hope it's on her end and not mine. I hope there's still people here, so I must have an okay connection. Okay, so let's segue into, well, how do we tell if our own throat chakra is balanced, whether it's excessive, which would be what we would mean when we say too open, or whether it's deficient, and that's what we would mean if it was too closed. Now, contrary to what you might hear people say, chakras are never completely blocked. They're never completely closed. Energy's always flowing through your body. But sometimes, many times, the energy doesn't flow through optimally. That's because there are blockages in them, or they're too closed. So there's still a little bit of space to get energy through, but it's not enough, right? So that's what we mean when we say too closed or deficient. So this is a list of things to think about for the deficient throat chakra. And what you're looking for when you're trying to discover if yours is deficient or it's excessive or it's balanced is you want to look for several things on this list. You don't have to check off every single thing on this list, but if you have several things on this list, your throat chakra is probably deficient, or like we would say, too closed. Okay, so if somebody has a weak or airy or pinched voice, and so you may find that your voice is like that in certain situations. That would be an indicator that your throat chakra is being impacted in those situations. I always think about, can't remember her name, but she was from Police Academy, and she was the woman who had the tiny little voice like this, and she was so quiet. So that is like classic throat chakra blockage for her, for sure. Can't remember her name. But that's the classic one. Now you don't need to have a pinched or airy or weak voice, or to have throat chakra issues. You don't have to be that extreme, but that's an example. Another thing, people with deficient throat chakras tend to let others dominate the conversation. So if you let other people just do all the talking and you don't really talk, that is oftentimes a sign of having some kind of a deficiency in the throat chakra. Being really self-conscious and being really shy, that's another throat chakra issue. So that was an issue for me as a kid, is, when you're told that the way you are isn't right, you become self-conscious, right? You become shy around people because you're not sure what to express. Another thing would be perhaps that you're very good in conversation in some situations, but in other situations you find that you just can't get your voice out. Okay, so that would probably show you that it's those situations that are impacting the throat. Difficulty putting your feelings into words. So sometimes people are very good at being able to say, I feel this way, I feel that way. And then sometimes people aren't really sure what they feel. I know that before I started therapy, long time ago, if somebody asked me what I felt, I didn't know, because I'd been told for so long to like tamp my emotions down, and then all of a sudden here's someone asking me what I feel, and I didn't know. So my answer would be, I don't know, until eventually I learned how to be able to express my emotions. And then another would be the fear of speaking. So all of these things would be indications that we have a weakened throat chakra, or kind of restrictive or deficient energy in that center. Now, what happens is that we tend to vacillate between the two extremes, so we can be deficient or not have enough energy in the throat chakra, and then in order to compensate, we sort of move to the other side, but we might move too far, and then we might become excessive. So you may find that you check off some things on both lists. Okay, so this is a sign that your throat chakra is excessive. So this is talking in defense, right? So a lot of defensive talking, so which makes a lot of sense, because if we had to tamp down our truth when we were younger or even when we were adults, uh, we then may be defensive when we talk, right? So that's a sign of excessive throat chakra. Anytime that we're controlling the conversation, that would be a sign of an excessive throat chakra. Talking without saying much, not any like real content in the talking. So you've probably experienced that yourself. You probably know some people who that's kind of the way that they communicate. It's just saying a lot but not really saying anything at all. Inability to listen, like a lot of interruptions. So also notice that when you're in a conversation with people, do you when you're speaking and then they start to talk, are you really able to listen to what they're saying, or are you thinking about what you're going to say next? That would be a sign of kind of an excessive throat chakra, or at least an imbalance in the throat chakra. And a lot of times that is a defensive strategy, because if we've been challenged, our voice has been challenged in the past, and we're like not very confident about what we're going to say, when the other person is talking, we're basically rehearsing what we're going to say. Gossiping. Anytime that we gossip, it's definitely an excessive throat chakra. There's nothing inherently wrong with but it can be destructive talk at times, and it's usually like energy that's not well spent, I guess, would be the best way to think of it. And then opposed to having the very weak and quiet voice, when your voice or when your throat chakra is excessive, the voice tends to be very loud and shrill. So people who have to talk over others, right? So like the voice gets louder and louder and louder, so they kind of dominate everybody else. That would be the sign of excessive. But that could be a defensive strategy from earlier when they were told that their voice didn't matter, right? So there's always this continuum. And like I said, it's quite common to have things on both lists. And what you may find too is that you communicate well in some places and not well in others. Now, how about physical manifestations? So physical manifestations of the throat chakra tend to be disorders of the throat. So if you're somebody who gets a lot of throat issues, a lot of sore throats, a lot of strep throat when you were younger, that would be a sign that there's like some impact in the throat chakra. People who get a lot of ear issues, like stuffy ears, ear infections, issues of the voice, like I said, the voice being like very hoarse, like a hoarse voice would be indication that the throat chakra is impacted. Stiff neck. As you can tell, I have throat chakra issues. I've told you some of my story, but I get a lot of neck pain. And so what I know is that when my neck is like out of alignment, that means my throat chakra is also out of alignment. We really can't have one without the other. So this is why when we are able to work physically to treat something and also work energetically to treat something, we do a much better job than when we just do one or the other. Anybody who's got tightness in the jaw, TMJ, I check off like all of these. Hearing problems, I don't really have hearing problems, but if you've got some hearing problems, that would be, I take that back. I lost some of my hearing from being in a band for 20 years. Issues with the thyroid or the parathyroid, either going either way, hyper or hypothyroidism. Lots of colds and coughs because the immune system is connected to the throat chakra. So all of these would be indications that you have throat chakra issues, in which case you will want to listen to the next part, which is, well, what will we do about it? So this is never a like sentence that that tells you, oh, you're just doomed to always have these problems. It just means that we've got some work to do here. So let me just see these comments. Hi, I see Sabrina's here. Hi, everybody. Okay, so if you are here live, feel free to put questions, comments in the chat. I'm going to tell you a little bit about correspondences and some work that you can do with the throat chakra, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Okay, so the element here for the throat chakra, like I mentioned in the beginning, is Akasha. That's a Sanskrit word for it. Is a witch we would probably call this spirit. The planet that's connected to the throat chakra is Mercury, and the metal is also Mercury. So if you work with planetary energies and you want to activate the throat chakra, it's very good to work with Mercury energy. And you can work with Mercury energy by working on a Wednesday, which is the day of Mercury. And the reason that I do Ask Aislin on Wednesday, this isn't a random decision to put it on Wednesday, it's because this is Mercury's day. This is the day when we talk better, we communicate better. And that's why I talk on this day. So deities you can work with, if you want to work with the throat chakra, are usually divided into Hindu deities because the chakra system comes from India, and then all other pantheons. So the deities from India and from the Hindu pantheon are Sarasvati. She is an incredible goddess to work with. She's a goddess of creativity and music. And so anybody who's a musician or like needs creative inspiration can work with her. Another goddess is Ganga, who is the river goddess associated with purification. Because again, the throat chakra is all about purification. Now, the other deities that you can connect to with the throat chakra are deities of communication. So we're going to have Mercury again, Hermes, who's the Greek counterpart. The muses are very good for working with the throat because remember, they're all connected to creation, creativity, and all of its various forms. Apollo, who is like a god of music and creativity. Breed, she's always got that creative aspect with her. And then another goddess that we worked with in our Shadow Seekers membership a couple months ago was Coventina. She's not really the first one that people would think of when they think of the throat chakra. She's a Celtic goddess of water. And so you would think, well, how does that connect to the throat? But she's a goddess of purification. And what is also very interesting, and this kind of segues into the next part, which is we're going to, well, actually not quite yet, but we're going to be talking about manifestation and creativity and all of that in a moment. But because Coventina is a goddess of water, she's immediately connected to the sacral chakra. And then she's also connected to the throat through her aspect of purification. And what that does is it connects the two creative centers of the body. So we have the sacral chakra, which is the creative center of the kind of the physical realm. And then we have the throat chakra, which is the creative center of the spiritual realm. And if we really want to manifest and we really want to create, we're going to work with both of those chakras. So more on that in just a bit, but let me finish up the correspondences. So herbs that you can work with are frankincense, one of my favorites. I love to burn it as a resin. Benzoin, mace. These might be a little hard to find, but those are good ones for the throat chakra. Minerals, anything blue, turquoise, very good. Aquamarine, one of my favorites. Celestite, lapis. Like I said in the beginning, I'm wearing my lapis heart tonight. Because lapis is just, to me, it's just one of the very best stones that I connect to when I'm working with the throat. Sodalite is similar to lapis, but a little bit less expensive, a little bit more affordable if you can find that. And I actually like this blue aura quartz that I found in at the psychic fair back in February was just speaking to me. I had to have this, and aura quartz, when it's painted or when it's made blue like this, is very much connected to the throat chakra. So I actually always put this on the computer whenever I am speaking, and it just helps to bring that throat chakra energy through to the people that I'm talking to. So those are some minerals. So anything blue will work with your throat chakra. Okay, so that is the correspondences. And so, like, as witches, we love our correspondences. So you can create rituals that use one or more of those correspondences. So you could burn some frankincense. You could bring in some like aquamarine or some lapis or sodalite. You could work on a Wednesday and draw in the planetary energies of Mercury. You could have a blue candle when you're working with your throat chakra, and then you could call in a goddess or a god connected to the throat as well. So like Sarasvati, for example. And then you could create a whole ritual or magical practice around that. So that would be one way to work with the throat that's unique to us as witches, because our muggle friends, they might still be doing throat chakra work, but they're maybe not doing the ritualistic aspect of it that we are. But okay, so what about some other practices? So what else could we do for the throat? So the biggest thing is loosen up the muscles in this area. Okay, so if you have a tight neck, like who doesn't? A lot of people do. When I teach throat chakra yoga and we start doing neck exercises, people, you'll just hear it in the room. People are like, oh, because there's like so much tension in the head. And just think about like the shoulders too connected here. So loosening that up. If you have tension in the jaw, loosening that up. You know, really, like you can take your knuckles and your middle knuckle and just kind of like get into some of this area in your jaw and see if you can loosen up some of the muscles there. Get into your throat and your neck and start to loosen up some of the muscles there. So that's a very easy thing that we can do. And also not only like physically, but also kind of setting the intention. It's amazing what you can do with the power of your own intention and thought. So like if you have a really tight jaw, and let's say you go into a light meditative state, send your energy to your jaw, send your attention to your jaw, and just encourage it to let go a little bit. And if you try that, you're going to be surprised how much that actually can work. Another thing we can do is release the voice. So sometimes this is like screaming. So I don't do that. I don't work with autistic children anymore, but I used to when I homeschooled kids, and now I mostly work with like older college students. But I remember I had this girl and she had like a lot of energy that she needed to get out. And sometimes she would act out and I would tell her, just take your pillow and just scream into it. And that helped her release some of that energy. So just releasing your voice. So you can do screaming, go out in the middle of nowhere and yell, or scream into your pillow, singing, chanting, toning. Great. I'll give you the seed sounds in just a moment for that as well. Storytelling. Telling your story to other people is a great way to release the voice and work with the throat chakra. Automatic writing. I will be doing an episode on automatic writing at some point, but it's a pretty simple exercise where you have to get into a pretty relaxed state. A lot of times people find better luck trying to write with their non-dominant hand, and then you just kind of let whatever's coming through come through. And sometimes people find that they can connect to their guides that way. They can connect to like other spirits that way. So automatic writing is a very good one. Practicing silence, if you find that your voice is excessive, practicing silence, right? Practicing active listening. Mantras. So mantras are in the West, we tend to call the mantras and affirmations the same thing. Affirmations are usually in English and they're like things that we're trying to draw in or just believe about ourselves. So I am, what's one I found last night that I just loved? It was for the root chakra, but it's such a good one. And it said, it was during my yoga practice last night, and it said, there's enough for everyone, including me. I love that one, right? So mantras or affirmations like that, then mantras are usually in Sanskrit or some kind of a vibrational language. So that moves us into the seed sounds. So seed sounds are small monosyllabic sounds, so generally just one syllable, that carry with it them meaning, but also the potential to change vibration or change energy. So as I mentioned earlier, the seed sound for the throat chakra is hum. So it's like usually when you do it, you want to intone it kind of low in your body. So I don't want to like sing it up in my head voice like hum, like that. I want to do it, I want to try to get it low in my body. So like hum. So that's an excellent one. Now, I've mentioned the other seed sounds before in other videos, but it's a good time to mention them for those who have never heard this before or want a refresher. So you can work through all of the chakras as kind of like a quick chakra balancing exercise. And you start at the root, and the seed sound for the root is lum, lum. And so it's spelled Lam, but the A in Sanskrit is pronounced So it's going to be lum. So you'd be like lum. And then that's the root chakra, lum. The sacral chakra is vam. And I'll write these all in the comments as well for anybody who wants some. So we got lum, root. Vam is the sacral. The solar plexus is rum, R-A-M, but pronounced rum. The heart is yum. That's my favorite. And then the throat is hum. And then the third eye is usually om. And then the crown is the silent om. So when you get to the crown, you just kind of vibrate om in your head. So it would go like lum, vum, rum, yum, hum, om, and then silent om. And you could just run through that for a couple of minutes and you just basically intone those. Just do it like 2 or 3 cycles through it. And that's a nice little chakra balancer. Now, if you want to work with a specific chakra, you just do the seed sound for that chakra. So if you want to do the throat, you would just do hum. Okay, so that's the seed sounds. And then, of course, singing bells or singing bowls and bells. Anything anytime we're bringing sound in, that's going to be a good way to balance the throat. And then let's talk about kind of manifestation and creativity just to end here. And then we'll open it up for any questions that people have. Okay, so the 5th chakra, like I mentioned in the beginning, is a master manifestation energy center. It's also the 2nd of our creative energy centers. Okay, so what that means is that the sacral chakra is our first creative energy center. So this is the creative center of the physical plane. So it literally is the physical center that creates life, right? So if we're going to have a baby, no matter what gender we are, we have to contribute something to having that baby, and that's all about the sacral chakra. Now, the sacral chakra also helps us create other things kind of in the physical plane. So if you want to create art or music, you definitely want to be working with the sacral chakra. If you do crafts, things like that, if you find that you're blocked creatively, you definitely want to work with the sacral chakra. But you also want to work with the throat chakra because the throat chakra takes the creation to the spiritual level. And so what that does is it's like so the etheric plane that's outside of us. So many times we'll say and you may hear that if you've ever come to one of my rituals, you may hear me say when we cast the circle, we cast it in the etheric plane, and we're in between space and time, right? We're outside of space and time. So the etheric plane is this level of kind of energetic being or existence that's beyond the physical, and many people can't tap into it at all. But those of us who are witches and kind of work with energy, we find that it's rather easy, or it can be rather easy eventually to tap into the etheric plane. And so when we close our eyes and we cast the circle and we're doing all that, we're basically drawing in the energy of that etheric plane, which is essentially between the veils, right? So we cross over, we're not crossing across the veils into the land of the dead. But we're not necessarily in the land of present space anymore. We're kind of in that in-between space. And that place makes manifestation possible because we're vibrating closer to the etheric plane. And so essentially what happens in manifestation is we're drawing in is being kind of written in the ether. So remember, going back to that word ether, which is the English translation of Akasha, which is the element connected to the throat chakra. We're writing what we're drawing in the ether. And that is as simple as just thinking about it. So for example, you think about a balloon, immediately something starts to kind of write in the etheric plane. But if we don't do anything with it, the energy of the etheric plane just sort of like erases. It just washes away, or it's like wind kind of blows it away. So what we're doing in manifestation is that we're trying to strengthen that writing in the etheric plane, that connection, right? So we're manifesting something like I'm going to actually show you 2 manifestation practices in just a second that I used over the summer. And when I used these, I was able to draw in like a couple $1,000s when I did this. And so basically it's a very intentional thing. So sometimes what will happen is people will say like, I'm not able to manifest, or my manifestation isn't working. And then when you talk to them about it, sometimes you'll find, well, they just did one spell and that was kind of it, and then they had a lot of doubts about it. So so number one, if we want to manifest, we want to make sure we don't have a lot of doubts about it. That's all about working with the solar plexus. So you have a lot of self-doubt, go back and watch my episode on the solar plexus. You'll find that on the Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube. But if our self-doubt is kind of okay, and then we're working to manifest, sometimes what we find with larger workings is that we need to do repetition. And so manifestation practices can help us do that. Now, when the throat chakra is not working optimally, though, it's going to make it hard for us to express our internal needs and desires externally. Okay, so if the throat chakra is kind of offline and the sacral chakra is offline, it's going to be hard for us to manifest. So the first thing we want to do is get those two chakras balanced. If those two chakras, we're working on those two chakras, then the next thing we can do is start bringing in some manifestation practices. So one thing that we can do, let's see, I did this in a ritual back at Lunaza, I think. So if anybody came to the Lunaza Lionsgate portal ritual, we did something similar to this. So these are these two manifestation practices, and I did this every single morning for like 2 weeks, and that's when I was able to manifest this $2,000. So the first one is kind of start with these goalpost arms. Just get over the fact that it looks weird. It works if you want to try it. And what you're going to do is you're going to take an inhale here. And then as you exhale, you're going to draw the hands together like this. And so you don't want the hands to come totally together. It's sort of like you're creating this space that you can gaze through. So you sort of imagine like the throat chakra and the third eye are aligned in this space. And this is like, it's almost like we're focusing our aim, right? So it's like, and you can go slower if you want. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're kind of connecting this to your breath. So it's in, out, in, out. And what I recommend doing is try that for a minute, work up to 3 minutes with that. You'll actually strengthen your arms a little bit as you do it as well. And then the second practice is with the arms outstretched like this. You bring one hand, I typically start with the right hand into the heart, look to the left hand, and you inhale. And then you're going to switch that, and you'll exhale as you bring the left hand into the heart and you look towards the right hand. And so I put it all together. It's like inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And what you'll find is you don't have to necessarily look directly at the hands. It's just the head kind of turns a little bit, but it looks like this. And then with this practice, I would do it for 1 minute, start with 1 minute, and work up to 3 minutes. And I did those two things every morning for 14 days, worked with my self-belief greatly in my solar plexus, and it really was a game changer when it came to manifesting. So something to try if you are having trouble manifesting, or just want to experiment, if there's something that you're trying to draw in. Okay, so I'm going to end here just by talking about something that happened to me. So when I was in, let's see, what year was this? 2000 and, gosh, maybe 15 or 16. Gosh, it might have been even earlier than that. I don't know. Anyway, there's this conference. Was called Pantheacon. Sadly, it no longer exists. But some of the big authors like Christopher Penczak and Christopher Hughes and Starhawk and who else would show up there? All kinds of big authors would show up, and they would give classes and rituals, and it was just the best thing ever. It was up in San Jose, California. And we used to go up there every year. And so there was this one year I went up there, and it was like they would do these classes all night, all day long, and the last one was at 11 p.m. to midnight, and then they would have like parties afterwards. And so I decided to go to this one class. Like a lot of my friends, they did too many classes in the day, and I don't, for some reason they didn't go to this class with me. But the class was called, I can't even remember what it was called because it wasn't anything that would suggest that you were going to balance your chakras at all. So I ended up going to this class, and there was this woman, and she was dressed all in white. And I come to find out later, she was trained in Kundalini yoga, and then she had all these like kind of helpers who were with her, and they instructed everybody to lie down on the ground. And so they said like close your eyes, and you really just try to trust like it's going to be a safe space. So I'm lying down, and then they start doing this sort of like meditation, or this sort of journeying meditation, and they start working through the different chakras, and you would hear people all around you would like be calling out, like moaning, crying, sobbing. And I remember, so as we were working on the root and the sacral chakra, there were some emotions that came up for me. You know, I had an eating disorder. I started with an eating disorder at a very young age. And so I knew that I had root and sacral chakra issues. And so I knew that some stuff would come up with them. And we got past that, and we were up in the solar plexus. And then we got to the heart, and I felt a little bit. And I kind of was tuning out other people because at first it's a little disconcerting to hear people like screaming out around you, but you just sort of like got into it. And then eventually we got to the throat chakra. And I didn't expect this at all, but it was like someone had taken a knife and they just plunged it into my throat. And it was just this terrible, terrible, agonizing pain. It was so painful. And, um, and I remember I started to, obviously I must have physically started to manifest something, because some of the helpers of the woman came around and they were kind of soothing me. And they're like, get it out, get it out, get it out. And I just like cried and cried and cried. And all of this energy was just releasing from my throat. And that was the first time that I realized, wow, I've got some big time throat chakra issues. Now looking back, I've told you some of my story from being a kid. It makes sense where they all come from. But that was kind of my experience. So if you can find a place where you can just release that throat chakra energy, like I said earlier, like screaming or just getting it out. We have so much energy stuck there. Just get that out and you're going to feel so much better. Okay, so I am going to end there. I'm going to open it up for the Q&A here. And hopefully I see it's already almost an hour. So I'm going to try to go quickly through this. Okay, so I see some comments here in the chat. And I see like Cindy was saying she's got TMJ. Yeah, okay. Okay, I actually have, let me see here. Cindy sent a question earlier about her tarot cards. So I was actually going to go through the 3 questions that were sent to me, and then anybody else has questions, put them in here. And I see a couple here, so I'll answer those as well. So let me start with Cindy's. So she said that she had recently, she saw a set of tarot cards that it really touched her psyche, and she decided to buy them, and she wants to know, how do I cleanse them and start using them correctly? So there's a lot of different ways that you can cleanse your deck. Personally, like when I get a new deck, sometimes I don't even cleanse it if it's new out of the wrapper. If it was purchased by someone who had used it, I definitely would cleanse it. But sometimes I don't even cleanse the ones outside of the wrapper, or that were in the wrapper. But if you do want to cleanse them, and when I do cleanse mine, got a couple of options. So one thing you can do is you can cleanse through the 4 elements. This is a way you could actually cleanse anything this way. A tool, essentially tarot is a tool, a witchcraft tool. And so if you're cleansing through the 4 elements, if you're going to use all 4 of them, you just find a way that you can work with those 4 elements. So starting with like air, that's really simple. You just take like a sage stick or incense, and then you would just kind of wave that around, get the smoke around the cards to cleanse them that way. And that could be enough. Like sometimes that's smoke cleansing is like, or smoke purification is the only thing people do. But if you wanted to use the other elements, what you could then do is you could take some salt to represent earth and just kind of sprinkle it over the cards. Don't do a lot of the next thing, like take a little tiny bit of water and just maybe sprinkle it over it, not much, because you don't want to wet the cards. And then from there with fire, again, you don't really want to run them through the flame, but you could run them over the flame, right? So it's the whole idea here is the intention that we're using the 4 elements to cleanse them. If the four elements, doesn't make a lot of sense for the cards, sometimes it does for like a tool, like an athame or a wand or something like that. If it doesn't make sense for the cards, just do the smoke cleansing. Now, another thing that you can do is you can cleanse them in salt or bury them. That's something that people do. I'm not sure I would bury a set of cards unless I like put it into like a bag. I make sure it was very sealed. So it may not make the most sense for cards, but it is another really good way to cleanse or purify a tool. Now, another way that you can cleanse is through visualization. So you can visualize white light emitting from you, right? Emitting from maybe your energetic, what you consider to be your energetic center, could be your heart or your solar plexus, and just imagine that kind of permeating the cards. And then another thing you can do is cleanse through intention, which is simply just like your intention's much stronger than you know. And just you intend to raise the vibration of these cards so that there are only, only good things come of your readings, or only truth comes of your readings. So any of those options or a combination of them, personally, I kind of like the visualization with the intention and then maybe the smoke cleansing together. I think that would be fantastic for a set of cards. Okay, next question. Jennifer said, if you sense spirit energies in your house, is there a way to tell if they are positive or negative or / dark, she said. So generally, the best way to tell is the way that you feel. If there are dark energies in your house and you're sensitive to energy, you're probably going to feel it. If you don't feel anything, they're probably neutral. And if you feel uplifted, they're probably positive. So, those are kind of the three kind of energies that might be there. Now, much of what we might consider negative energy in a space is oftentimes, or like a haunting, is oftentimes residual energy or thought forms that are left over. It's not as common that souls get trapped, honestly. It's not as common. A lot of what feels like souls that are trapped in a place is actually some residual energy from them or thought forms, part of them that's kind of broken off while the rest of the soul has gone to wherever it's going next. But sometimes, that kind of energy does get trapped in a place. That would not be the kind of energy that would just show up there, though. That would be the kind of energy that would be there when a person moved into a space. But the other thing is you can pick up energy outside of the house and bring it into the house or bring it into your space. And so, for example, I went to this cave once that I found out later. It was like a place where a shaman had been like murdered. And all these people would go there. They don't even know what it is. And they would stomp around this place. And I remember when I went into the cave, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like this overwhelming sense of dread in the cave. And it was really weird because my claircognizance told me that like the spirit was like neutral towards me, only because like I'm somebody who's like more reverent to energies and spirits, but was pretty pissed off about these people who are kind of stomping around on the cave above it. But when I came home, I had a terrible nightmare, and I felt like the energy had kind of followed me home. So I sort of cleansed my space with some smoke cleansing, did some chakra work to raise my vibration, and it kind of let go of that energy. But if you feel like you kind of bring negative energy home with you, it can sometimes be as simple as just raising the vibration, your own vibration, through raising your chakras or working with some of your chakras, smoke cleansing, visualization of white light, something like that. But usually when it comes to asking the question of how do I know if it's negative or positive, if it's negative, you're sensitive to energy, you're going to know it's negative. So if you don't feel that, it's probably just a neutral energy. And then I had a question from Brianna. She says, what's one thing you can do to begin working with your energy? So one of the best things to do is to balance the chakras. So you can work with the seed sounds, like I mentioned earlier. So that would be kind of intoning the sound, lum for the root chakra, vum for the sacral, blinking here, rum for the solar plexus, yum for the heart, and hum for the throat, om for the third eye, and then the silent om for the crown. So if you intone those sounds, that's like a little like refresh for all the chakras. Or if you find that there's a particular chakra that you need to balance, that would be a great way to start working with energy. And the best way to do that, like especially if you're new and you don't know anything about chakras, is look in your body. Where's your pain? And where is your tension? And that is a key to the part of your body that needs the most work. So if the tension is in your neck, it's your throat chakra. If the tension's in your hips, it's your sacral chakra. If it's in your stomach, it's your solar plexus. And so if you're new to it, that's a perfect way to decide which chakra to begin working with, and that's a great way to start working with the energy. The other thing I would recommend is doing a little bit of light breath work. Just start doing breath work, because breath is energy. As it starts to move through the body, you'll experience that movement and you'll start to understand what that feels like. And you'll know when your energy is moving well and when it's not moving well. And then another thing you can do is the ball of energy exercise. So this is where you rub your hands together and you create some frictional energy here. That's what the heat is. So that's a physical energy we're creating. And you do this for a bit, and then close your eyes, and then put your hands out like this, maybe about half a foot away, and then work to kind of move the hands together. And many people will start to feel like a pulsing in their palms. Some people feel it as a tingling. Some people sense cold. See, I can feel it, my palm pulsing. And that is me sensing the energy that's between them. And when that starts to go away, you can rub your hands together again and get more frictional energy built up, and then try it again. And that's just a very elementary way to start feeling energy. But the real key to working with energy is to make sure that you're feeling the energy. That's why working with the chakras, the breath work, and the ball of energy is a good beginning spot. Okay, let me see any more questions here. Jennifer said she's been having kind of a hard time swallowing lately. Yeah, definitely throat. I'm in the process of setting up a swallow study, but lately I've been wondering if maybe it's a physical sign of a blocked throat chakra. Probably, yeah. Is that possible? Yeah, and sending good thoughts that it's nothing serious. A lot of times our mind goes to the worst place. So we're not, it's always good to go to a physical doctor and have them look at everything to make sure that the physical is all good. And if the physical is all good, 9 times out of 10, it's energetic that we're feeling. But even if they find something, like maybe they find something kind of minor, you can still, do whatever treatments that they're going to suggest, and then do your energetic work. And together, that's going to accelerate the healing. But yeah, I would definitely work with the throat. I've noticed when I get like a lump in my throat, I remember there's this one time I was like, it wasn't really a swallowing problem, but I always felt like there's something like, it was kind of a swallowing problem. I felt like there's something in the back of my throat, and I start freaking out, like, is this cancer? Or is this, all the crazy thoughts that go through our head. And honestly, it was just, I needed to work on my throat chakra, and nothing came of anything physical. And once I was working with my throat chakra, I noticed that energy moved and I felt much better. So definitely start working with your throat chakra. You're in Shadow Seekers, so you can go in and grab some of the throat chakra stuff from a couple months ago. Work on that, and some of these practices I talked about tonight, and then just follow up with your swallow study, and then make sure everything's okay on the physical front. Okay, anybody else? Any more questions, comments? To make sure I'm not missing anything here. I think I got everybody's questions. So I'm just going to end by saying what's coming up next. So next week, it's so crazy to me that Yule is like almost here. So we're actually going to do an episode next week, or I'm going to do an episode next week on Yule, winter solstice, on the 13th. And we'll learn all about the holiday and get us prepared for Yule and the winter solstice. And then on the 20th, we are going to be doing our Coven of Midnight's Flame Yule ritual. This year we're working with Odin, and we are going to enact the Wild Hunt. If you've never done the Wild Hunt, I highly recommend coming to this ritual. It's a lot of, it's very deep and cathartic, and you're going to be able to release a lot. We're going to work with the shadow self as well during it, and then there's going to be a lighthearted part of the ritual where we're going to do an old-fashioned bloat. It usually comes from like the Norse. Since we're working with Odin in the first place anyway, kind of comes from the Norse pantheon. But a bloat is a lot of fun. It's a good way to toast the year, our accomplishments, and what has happened. And then we'll sing some pagan carols, and it's just going to be a really great and leave some wishes for the new year. So a really great kind of deep and dark and cathartic ritual that then ends in a lot of light, which is what Yule is all about anyway. So if you are in Shadow Seekers, you guys that you have your ticket to that. You're already coming to that, so no need to purchase one. But anybody who wants to join us who isn't in Shadow Seekers, you guys can get a ticket for as little as $1 donation. So just look soon. We're going to have some information about how you can get your ticket. That's in 2 weeks from tonight on the 20th. But next weekend I'll be back with an episode on Yule. Okay, I'm going to sign off now because I don't think I see any more comments, but if I missed anybody's, I'll go through the chat. Hopefully I'll get them. If you liked what you heard tonight, just leave a thumbs up or a heart somewhere in the video. It helps us get this out to the feed of more people. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, make sure to subscribe to Body Mind Witchcraft so you won't miss any future episodes. All right, until next time, blessed be.